In researching for today's story, I came across some interesting things. A conspiracy that places Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the back seat of Al Capone's armored car on his way to deliver the iconic Day of Infamy speech after the attack on Pearl Harbor. A truly fantastical series of events that never happened. So I did even more research, and after diving deeper on the whole subject, I've decided we're actually just going to bust this myth wide open. As the story goes, on December 8th, 1941, President Roosevelt required a car in order to deliver his famous post-Pearl Harbor speech to the members of a joint Congress. Now, needing a car on such short notice, Secret Service member Michael Riley acquired an armored 1928 Cadillac from the Treasury Department. Mr. Riley explained this to Roosevelt, saying, "Mr. President, I've taken the liberty of getting a new car. It's armored. I'm afraid it's a little uncomfortable, and I know it has a dubious reputation." With such a cryptic introduction, Roosevelt inquired as to this dubious reputation, and was given the car's history as Al Capone's personal vehicle acquired during legal proceedings from his tax evasion case, prompting the most popular phrase of the story, where Roosevelt simply replied, "I hope Mr. Capone doesn't mind." Now, I started this video off by asserting that these events never happened. But what gives me that much certainty? Well, this story has been told countless times by multiple rather trustworthy sources. But after digging a little bit beyond the singular first-hand account of Mr. Riley, the details, they fail to add up. We'll start off with Mr. Capone himself. Al Capone was an infamous gangster. You might have heard of him. But the benefit of being a well-known figure in history is that historians have pieced together a pretty strong picture of his life. Al Capone made a habit of not owning things. Instead, he would put large purchases under his wife or his mother-in-law's name. But why would he do that? Well, simply put, if he didn't have any legal assets, then any assets he did have would be significantly harder to seize in any legal proceedings. And right there, we have the first strike against the story, firmly placing an obstacle between the Treasury and the infamous 1928 Cadillac. But that by itself isn't really enough. Contrary to his standard behavior, Al Capone did purchase multiple cars under his own name. Two of them likely armored cars. The first, a 1924 McFarlane, which was later traded for a 1926 McFarlane. Later court documents also list a Cunningham 16-cylinder and multiple Lincolns and Packards. Two Cadillacs are also listed, but both were 1931 models that were very likely unarmored, and Al Capone never actually got to ride in them, as he was in the middle of his 1931 tax prosecution at the time. Both of those Cadillacs would later be repossessed by the dealership for non-payment. You know, because he was in prison at the time. But this gives us a second strike against the story, as there are no accounts of Al Capone ever owning a 1928 Cadillac, much less an armored version of the car. But just in case that wasn't enough to drive the nail into the coffin for this story, may I present a photograph of President Roosevelt's drive to Capitol Hill to give his speech. Now, if you have sharp enough eyes, you might be able to notice that the car in front, carrying the president, doesn't particularly look like a 28 Cadillac. As it turns out, the car in the picture is a 39 Cadillac, similar to this one, as opposed to the Al Capone car, which looked more like this one. And that marks the third strike against this story, as I'm fairly certain that a 28 Cadillac and a 39 Cadillac aren't the same car. In recent years, however, the Secret Service has decided to change the tune of the story, as they began claiming the car taken from Al Capone was a 39 Packard. But this still doesn't line up, as, again, I don't think that Cadillac and Packard are the same company. This would imply that the Treasury Department waited around 7 years before coming to collect a brand new car from Mr. Capone, which would also imply that a severely deteriorating and sick Al Capone got out of prison, went to a dealership, and then bought a car in his own name without leaving a paper trail to prove it. While some might find that believable, in my opinion, there are two large flaws with that logic. First, that the government waited 7 years before coming to collect money. No. And second, that neither of the homes that the Capone family owned were ever seized. Let me know down in the comments what you think happened here. Why would Mr. Riley write such a story in his memoirs? Was it a misremembered date or setting? Or was he simply trying to sell a book through embellishment? So there we have it. A tale of intrigue, conspiracy, and most importantly, fantasy. Thank you all for watching. Let me know down in the comments if there's any other stories that you want me to cover. If you're not already down there fighting about whether or not this is true, I don't really care. Drop a like if you liked the video. Subscribe if you want more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Al Capone never actually got to ride in these, as he was in the middle of his tax filing.
What? That never happened.
Yeah, I think that was part of the problem.